Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In the early hours of a September morning in Elabel, Georgia, federal agents stormed Hyundai's new electric vehicle battery plant, detaining hundreds of South Korean workers. What was meant to be a symbol of U.S.-South Korea cooperation became a diplomatic crisis, threatening a $26 billion investment and shaking the foundation of a decades-old alliance. As the world watched, the fate of the workers and the future of Hyundai's American dream hung in the balance, raising a critical question: can trust between allies survive such a shock? The Hyundai Motor Group Metaplant America in Georgia was more than a factory. It was a $26 billion commitment to the U.S. economy and a flagship for green industry. The project promised over 8,500 jobs and relied on South Korean specialists to install advanced robotics and manufacturing equipment. These experts were essential for launching the plant, representing a deepening economic partnership between the U.S. and South Korea. After a high-profile summit, Hyundai increased its U.S. investment, making the Georgia plant the centerpiece of its American strategy. The subsequent disruption was not just a logistical setback, but a direct threat to a cornerstone of U.S.-South Korea economic diplomacy. In the early days of September, the hum of construction at the Meta plant in Georgia was abruptly silenced. Federal agents, in a meticulously coordinated operation, swept onto the site, their presence unmistakable and their mission clear: to enforce U.S. immigration law. The raid was swift and overwhelming, catching many by surprise and bringing the massive project to a sudden halt. Nearly 500 workers were detained that day, an extraordinary number by any standard. Among them, over 300 were highly skilled specialists from South Korea, flown in to help build the state-of-the-art facility. For many, the sight of these engineers and technicians, hands bound in cuffs, was both shocking and deeply unsettling. U.S. authorities insisted the workers had violated visa regulations, claiming their paperwork did not match the roles they were performing. But South Korean officials quickly pushed back, arguing that the workers were in the country legally, caught in a bureaucratic gray area where no clear visa category existed for their specialized work. The confusion exposed a gap in the system, one that neither side had anticipated. As images of handcuffed engineers and workers flashed across television screens in South Korea, public outrage erupted. The incident was no longer just an immigration dispute, it had become a question of national pride and dignity. Many South Koreans saw the treatment of their citizens as humiliating, and the story quickly took on a life of its own. Headlines blared across South Korean newspapers, and government officials in Seoul wasted no time. They lodged a formal diplomatic protest with Washington, demanding answers and warning that such actions could have serious consequences for future investment in the United States. The diplomatic temperature rose, with both sides scrambling to control the narrative. Suddenly, the decades-old alliance between the U.S. and South Korea was under strain. Billions of dollars in investment hung in the balance, and the future of thousands of American jobs was thrown into uncertainty. The Meta plant, once a symbol of international cooperation, now stood as a stark reminder of how quickly things could unravel. Around the world, governments, investors, and ordinary citizens watched anxiously, waiting to see if the United States and South Korea could find a way to resolve the diplomatic firestorm that had erupted on a factory floor in Georgia, a crisis that threatened not just a project, but the very fabric of a vital international partnership. For the detained South Korean workers, the American dream turned into a nightmare of confusion, fear, and humiliation. Families back home endured days of silence, while stories of shackled engineers spread rapidly, fueling anger and anxiety. The local Georgia community, once hopeful for economic revival, now faced uncertainty and disappointment as construction ground to a halt. The workers' repatriation brought relief, but left a sense of betrayal and a project in disarray. The human cost of the crisis underscored the unpredictable risks of global work and the fragility of international partnerships. As outrage grew in South Korea, the streets of Seoul became a focal point for public anger. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, waving banners and demanding immediate action from their leaders. The sense of urgency was palpable, with citizens and officials alike fearing the consequences if the crisis was not resolved quickly. Inside government offices, phones rang constantly as diplomats scrambled to coordinate a response. The world watched as South Korea's government faced mounting pressure to protect its citizens and restore national pride. In a decisive move, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun boarded a plane to Washington, determined to secure the release of the detained workers. Upon arrival, Cho wasted no time, heading straight to high-level meetings with U.S. officials. The South Korean delegation demanded not only the safe return of their citizens, but also concrete assurances that such incidents would never happen again. The stakes were high and every moment counted as the diplomatic clock ticked. Inside the negotiation rooms, tension was thick. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his team insisted that the workers remain temporarily to help train American replacements, arguing it was essential for ongoing operations. South Korea, however, saw this as an unacceptable risk to their citizens' safety and dignity. The talks grew heated, revealing deep divisions and a lack of trust between the two allies. Both sides exchanged proposals and counterproposals, but compromise seemed elusive. Meanwhile, the workers themselves waited anxiously, exhausted from days of uncertainty. Many had not slept, haunted by fears of being stranded far from home. Their families in South Korea watched news updates with growing anxiety, desperate for any sign of progress. The emotional toll was immense, as hope faded with each passing hour. After several days of intense, round-the-clock negotiations, a breakthrough was finally reached. The United States agreed to repatriate the workers, ending the immediate crisis. Both governments presented the agreement as a diplomatic victory, but behind the scenes, officials knew the alliance had been tested as never before. The resolution brought relief, but also lingering questions about the future. This episode exposed the fragile nature of international cooperation, especially when national interests and global commitments collide. The cracks in the alliance were now visible, raising concerns about how both countries would handle future crises. Analysts warned that trust, once broken, would be difficult to rebuild. The diplomatic scramble may have averted immediate disaster, but the damage to mutual trust was undeniable. As convoys departed and the headlines faded, both sides were left to reflect on the cost of the crisis and the challenges that lay ahead. Now, the future of the U.S.-South Korea partnership faces new uncertainty. Both nations must confront the reality that their alliance, once thought unbreakable, has been shaken, and the path forward remains unclear. With the workers back in South Korea, the true cost of the crisis became clear. Trust had been shattered. Hyundai's $26 billion U.S. investment, once a symbol of confidence, was now under review, with the Georgia plant facing costly delays and supply chain disruptions. The raid sent a chilling message to foreign investors. No project, however large, is immune from domestic policy shocks. Other global companies watched with alarm, questioning the reliability of the U.S. as a destination for investment. The tension between attracting foreign capital and enforcing hardline immigration policies now threatened America's economic ambitions. The crisis exposed a glaring gap in U.S. visa policy. No clear path exists for short-term, highly specialized foreign technicians essential to modern manufacturing. These experts, often brought in for urgent troubleshooting or to install and calibrate advanced machinery, are the backbone of global supply chains. Yet, the current system treats them as an afterthought, forcing companies to navigate a maze of outdated regulations and lengthy approval processes. As a result, critical projects stall, and the U.S. risks falling behind in the race for technological leadership. The lack of a streamlined, responsive visa category for these workers is not just a bureaucratic oversight, it's a strategic vulnerability in an era where speed and expertise are everything. Legal experts argue the system's rigidity left companies and workers vulnerable, while enforcement agencies exploited this ambiguity. Instead of providing clarity or guidance, authorities often defaulted to punitive measures, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. For many firms, the threat of sudden raids or investigations became a constant risk, discouraging them from seeking the talent they desperately needed. This legal gray area not only undermined trust in the system, but also exposed both employers and employees to significant legal and financial jeopardy. Economists warn that immigration crackdowns can undermine industrial policy, delaying projects and costing far more than any perceived benefit. When factories sit idle waiting for technical expertise, the ripple effects are felt across entire industries: lost productivity, missed deadlines, and ballooning costs. The broader economic impact is profound. Innovation slows, competitiveness erodes, and the U.S. loses its edge in attracting global investment. In a world where supply chains are tightly interwoven, even minor disruptions can have outsized consequences, making a flexible, forward-thinking immigration policy not just desirable, but essential. Politically, the incident damaged America's reputation as a reliable partner and fueled skepticism in Seoul about the alliance. South Korean businesses and officials began to question whether the U.S. could be trusted to honor its commitments, especially when domestic enforcement actions seemed to disregard broader strategic interests. The diplomatic fallout extended beyond headlines, straining relationships that had taken decades to build, and casting a shadow over future cooperation in critical sectors like technology and defense. Analysts agree, the raid was an unforced error with consequences for both investment and security ties. Investors, already wary of geopolitical risks, saw the incident as a sign of unpredictability in the U.S. regulatory environment. Meanwhile, security cooperation, which relies on deep trust and seamless collaboration, was put at risk by actions that seemed arbitrary and heavy-handed. The message sent was clear. Policy missteps at home can reverberate far beyond national borders. The government had options, collaboration, warnings, or status adjustments, but chose a public show of force. Instead of quietly resolving the issue through dialogue or administrative fixes, authorities opted for a dramatic intervention that made headlines but solved little. This approach not only escalated tensions, but also signaled to international partners that the U.S. might prioritize optics over practical solutions, undermining confidence in its ability to manage complex cross-border challenges. The fallout is a stark reminder that legal, economic, and diplomatic policies must work in concert, not at cross purposes. When these spheres collide instead of collaborate, the result is confusion, lost opportunity, and damaged relationships. As the world becomes more interconnected, the need for coherent, agile policymaking has never been greater. Only by aligning legal frameworks with economic realities and diplomatic priorities can the U.S. hope to maintain its leadership and credibility on the global stage. In the aftermath, both governments are scrambling for solutions, with talks underway to create a new visa category for skilled foreign technicians. This proposed visa aims to close the loophole that ensnared the Hyundai workers, but its creation faces political and bureaucratic hurdles in Washington. For Hyundai and other investors, time is of the essence. Delays threaten projects and erode confidence. The speed and seriousness of U.S. action will test its commitment to foreign partners. Meanwhile, Hyundai must find ways to restart its Georgia project, seeking stronger guarantees for the future. Rebuilding trust will require more than paperwork. It demands a lasting shift in policy and attitude. The Georgia raid is a cautionary tale for a globalized world, revealing how quickly alliances can be shaken by domestic decisions. If a strategic investor like Hyundai can be caught in such turmoil, no foreign company is truly safe. The crisis has cast a shadow over America's appeal as an investment destination and exposed tensions in the U.S.-South Korea alliance. Rebuilding trust will require more than new visas. It will take a renewed commitment to shared values and reliability. In a world where supply chains and technology depend on international cooperation, trust is the most valuable and fragile currency. The lesson from Georgia is clear. Breaking trust is easy. Rebuilding it is the real challenge.